using AI and game theory to improve social outcomes. This is an idea is inspired by Joshua Bengio that I recently came across in a podcast interview with Peter Beal. And I think it's a very interesting idea because it solves a couple of, it's an answer, it's a potential answer to a couple of questions that have been bothering me recently. And one of them, of course, is liberty and the protection of liberty, which I think is under threat. I am just about to finish an essay, which I'm going to discuss in more details. The title is still a working title, but I think I'm using a poetry line that I came up with, inspired by Jim Morrison. So this is a little bit now tangential, but the title is "Through the Stranger of Liberty, Freedom Has Come." It's inspired by the song "Waiting for the Sun," and the idea here is that liberty is the actual foundation worth fighting for, and freedom is the result. And of course, we want freedom, which is the ability to act without oppression. That's something we want, and liberty is what allows that to happen. So this is the sort of the backdrop of this conversation, and what I want to talk about here is the threats to liberty and how we can deal with those threats. Threats to liberty are, in my opinion, there's several threats to liberty. One is the sort of the wokeism, which is infecting our academic institutions. There is the public health officials that are, that have been misusing power and misappropriating power over decades now, and have shown their teeth in what happened during the pandemic. And then we also have the military-industrial complex. And I've written an essay about this a couple of months ago, where I spoke about this, in particular, the threat of the academic-industrial complex. And I've summarized this essay as the threats to society that are within, which we were warned of by Dwight Eisenhower in his famous farewell speech. So the man who fought the wars for freedom warned us about the threats to liberty that are within. And I want to talk about solutions here. And one of the solutions is inspired by Joshua Bengio, and it is the idea to use AI models and game theory to come up with better solutions to solidify liberty in society. This is the idea. This is what I want to talk about in this particular podcast. This is not even a podcast. It's March 19, 2023. This is Scream Telco. It's a Sunday. There's no update for the year. We are up 46.3%. The market is up 2%. We're outperforming by 44.3%. Just before I go into that conversation, the issues, of course, are centered around the banking failures in the US, and now also threats of banking failures in Europe. And we believe that the outcome will be, sooner or later, that the Federal Reserve Bank in the US and the national banks across Europe and the Western world will make depositors whole, because there is a risk now of maturity mismatch, which has been driven by record low interest rates, which is now causing financial institutions to crumble. What happened in the UK a few months ago, when the pension fund system was under threat because of the maturity mismatch, that is now happening across the world. And there's only two scenarios here. One is that we let this whole system collapse, and then we bail out the banks, or we bail them out before the system collapses. But in the end, there's going to be a continuous quantitative easing accompanied by bailouts of all these institutions. So this is our working assumption. But now let's talk about the liberty topic. So again, the essay is about the threat to liberties, which are the three big threats that are the academic industrial complex, the military industrial complex, and the public health industrial complex. And in all of these cases, it's the misappropriation of power and influence that is causing the threat. Now, most importantly, I think I am identifying one of the sources that is not, it's a source of misappropriation of power. It's the tool by which power is misappropriated, and it's also a good signal. So if you ask yourself, is there an institution that is somehow exerting more influence than they should, or is a threat to liberty? Ask yourself, are they using doublethink? Doublethink is a really important concept that we take from George Orwell's 1984, and this book is more important than ever. And it's more important than ever, not just because he's giving us a sort of scary story of a society gone havoc. It is also giving us the tools to analyze a society and understand, basically, excuse my friends, when the shit hits the fan when it comes to liberty. When there is doublethink, then there is a threat. Doublethink is when you simultaneously accept a train of thought and also condemn it at the same time. For example, when wokeism is on the one hand trying to fight racism, but on the other hand accepting race as a discriminating factor, that is doublethink. You can't have it both ways. You can't condemn it here and accept it there. When and doublethink goes across all these institutions. When public health officials tell us that they want to save lives by locking people down, and then at the same time, destroy people's livelihoods by locking them down, that's doublethink. So what that means in plain English is that you're just misusing an argument for your own benefits. But that's not even what I want to discuss here. I just want to discuss the actual signal, which is doublethink. And this is very important because when it comes to the actual idea that I have here, which is, again, how could we design an algorithm that uses game theory and many, many billions of iterations to design strategies that could help us today improve the likelihood of better outcomes, better social outcomes in the future. And the power of AI is that it can model complex systems much better than what we can do with logic. It can do this very well with biology. It can do this with chess and with Go and so on and so forth. And the real crucial idea is, because, and I write this in my essay, so when we talk about how do we protect liberty, there's two ways to protect liberty. One is, as I call, offense. The other is defense. Offense is when you actively make it less likely that misappropriation happens, okay? So you try to prevent it from happening in the first place. And the way you do this, to our knowledge, is to institutions. So you set up, you come up with a set of rules that define how the agents play. The analogy is like the game. The game of soccer has certain rules, and according to those rules, the players play, but also the skill set is developed. Certain players make it in the sport, others don't. All of that stuff. The same applies to the economy. So what kind of rules should we set up? This is what the founding fathers were thinking about when they set up the Constitution. And I think with AI and the ability to use complex iterations, many, many iterations, we can do what I call play chess in reverse, right? We can, instead of just having an AI playing chess where the rules are fixed, and all we're doing is trying to find the best moves of the players, how about we also allow for degrees of freedom in the rules themselves? How about we change the rules, and then we see what is the optimal set of rules given the implied adaptation by the players. So, and this is very important. If I change the rules of the game of soccer, for example, if I say that the field is now 100 meters instead of 100 meters, 200 meters, then also the players will change, right? We'll have different types of players that can run faster over longer distances and so on and so forth. What about if we change the rule that there's no ties, that every game has to be decided by penalty shootouts if there is no result in the regular time? So this will change the skill set. This will change the incentive structure. So again, what I'm proposing here is let's think about algorithms that can change the rules and then also account for the change in the dynamics of the agent. So if we change the rules of if we change the institutional framework of the economy, certain skill sets will be more in demand versus others, and so on and so forth. And we can iterate over billions of iterations and then maybe come up with a better system of institutions. So this would be the offense. The defense, as I said, I call it in my essay, defense is like in a fight. You just prevent the attack, and the best way to do this in societal and political context is to cut the money supply. This is like the concept in cancer, where cancer cells are being cut off from the blood supply. This is typically a very strong way to prevent damage from happening. So to summarize, again, I'm going to discuss this a little bit deeper once the essay is published. This is a preliminary podcast, but where I'm sharing some ideas about the essay, which again is about ideas of how to solidify the fight against the oppression of freedom, or the fight for freedom, if you want. I think freedom is the most important human invention. It's more important than literature or language or anything like that, because it really has created the most wealth and the most well-being and the most happiness that this planet has ever seen. So freedom is very important. Now, how do we fight for it? How do we prevent people from curbing our freedom? And my idea is, we try to design an algorithm that takes into account the interactive play, the game theoretic aspects of agents and institutions. And we think about a better way to design institutions so that freedom is maximized in the long term. This is the fundamental idea here. The fundamental idea. It's inspired by Joshua Bengio, and I think it's a very, very important idea. Hopefully this essay can give and inspire other thought leaders and academics and so on and so forth to think about this. This is a problem that is a lot deeper, of course, than coming up with an algorithm. Well, that's not so much easier said than done. But I think the idea is very important. Again, we change the rules, we adapt the rules, and then we iterate and we see how the agents adapt, and then we let the agents adapt. So this is an iterative process, a recursive iterative process. And I think fundamentally what it will do over the long run, it will help us design strategies and institutions today that will increase the likelihood of better institutions that will support freedom in the future, because freedom is not a logical consequence of evolution. Freedom had to be invented by humans. If you bombard the earth with enough photons, you will emit a Tesla Roadster, but you will also come up with freedom. Liberty, which is then the consequence of liberty is freedom. So I'm using this Andrej Karpathy quote just to make clear that this is not something that comes automatically. Freedom is not autopilot. Freedom and liberty need to be fought for and cherished like heirloom jewelry and passed down from generation to generation. And how can we do it best? How can we prevent the obstruction of liberty? Well, how about we design institutions and rules today that increase the likelihood of future outcomes? And we can use AI for that, because it can help us iterate over billions of iterations, and maybe come up with ideas that our natural logic, our human natural given logic maybe wouldn't come up with. Thank you.